Hello,
I'm Zach,
I'm Braxton.
and we are
From old to new.
Today we're going to be exploring a first-time viewing for us of a classic 1973 horror flick, The Exorcist.
Yes, so this is our first time actually watching the uncensored version. I've watched the TV edited version on TV.
And this is actually just my first time viewing it in general. So,
So
and you have warned me multiple times not to watch it.
yes, it's very vulgar, obscene maybe. But what you think of it?
Honestly, I thought it was great. I usually, when I watch horror films, I like, the classic slasher films or the classic monster films. So it's nice seeing, a horror film like this.
Yeah, this was kind of like one of, I don't want to say the first, but it was one of the first like demon possession movies. This is kind of what kicked off the craze to where we get movies such as Evil Dead
The
and The
Conjuring,
Conjuring
yeah.
and stuff like that. And this was really the phenomenal film that kind of got people into like, hey, demon possession is scary.
Yeah, and also kind of felt like some points in this movie, I felt like there were some scenes that influenced other horror films as well.
Oh, definitely.
All right, so let's just go ahead and dive on into it.
So we open up. We're at a Arabian digging site.
And then over we meet Father Marin, who's on an archaeological dig, where eventually they discover like some demonic statues as well as a St. Joseph's cross.
Yes, and right away you just get this sense of dread and uneasiness, like you know something bad is about to happen.
Especially like during the scene where like they're examining the dig and the clock stops, which was kind of something we discussed, which I think was also influenced on by Evil Dead because of the clock stopping scene.
Yeah, Evil Dead definitely took inspiration from that.
Eventually, the father's like, "Okay, I need to leave. I need to go back," but he's still like, shocked by the signs of like, dogs fighting, evil statues.
So yeah, right from the get go of this movie, you definitely get the sense that something is off, something's wrong, and there, going from there, we meet a young girl named Reagan, and her mom. And Reagan has been playing with a Ouija board.
Which is never a good sign. I swear to myself, I never play with a Ouija board after these
never.
movies. Yeah, and she's talking to Captain Howdy, who kind of is like the Tony to little Danny's in The Shining.
Yeah, and so her mom is starting to get very curious and worried, like, who is Captain Howdy? Is he just an imaginary friend? Um, but she's also noticing that she's playing with this board, and just she starts to get very concerned.
And also we meet Father Karras, who is a priest in the local town who is starting to lose his faith after losing his mother, feeling guilty about not being there for her.
Yes, and we spend a lot of time with Father Karras. We get to know him. We get to see how he was trying to take care of his mother and do all this job.
He's conflicting with his faith.
Yes.
And I also noticed some stuff about him. I think that the Omen came out after the Exorcist, correct?
Yes.
Was it chosen? Was the name for the kid in the kid in the Omen's name is Damien? So was he chosen for? What did they choose the name based on this movie?
I have no idea.
It could have been an inspiration.
It could have been an inspiration, but I'm not sure.
I've noticed Damien is used a lot in these kind of movies.
Yes, it is.
And so going on, Reagan begins showing like some other psychological signs where she's hearing voices, she's lashing out.
Yes, and the it's a slow progression, and her mother takes her to medical treatments to see if there's anything wrong with her, and they can't see any signs of any illness or anything to that nature.
I kind of felt like this movie did a lot of exploring, like they did. I feel like it was a logical progression of like okay, something's wrong with my daughter. Obviously, I need to search for physical, physical, then psychological, and then otherworldly.
Yes. She doesn't. It's not like most movies, I guess, where she's possessed and automatically the mother's just like, she's possessed, I need to get a priest. This is more of like, she's not acting right, I need to find out why, so I'll take her to specialists and psychiatrists.
They take her to everybody. I mean, there's even like a meeting where she spends like 88 doctors, still cannot find any problems with it. Which I felt like that scene kind of affected a scene in Stranger Things. Like in season 2 of Stranger Things, they were doing with Will, who was doing with his own, like, possession kind of situation. And there was a scene where like the mother is meeting with the doctors in the lab. And I felt like that scene showed very strong Easter eggs of this scene in The Exorcist.
It probably did, because, Stranger Things is based around the 80s and pop culture was very influenced in that show, and there's spooky things that happen, so it probably was influenced. So, getting back to the movie, um, let's see. So they take her to the psychiatrist, and like nothing's happening. Like they can't figure out what's wrong, and she just she just gets worse. And
Until eventually the doctors are like, maybe psychologically, if she believes she's possessed, she performing an exorcism might help her believe that the evil spirit has left her and help her get better. And I kind of felt like one of the things I noticed in this movie, they really held on to like traditional signs of spiritual house that have been seen in pop culture nowadays. Like, like the phone's ringing and there'll be nobody there.
yeah,
Lights flickering. Cold spots throughout the house.
yeah. Well, this was also one of the first movies that was kind of like that. So, like all those references that pop culture makes are kind of based off of this in a sense. And so, yeah, she just her mother starts to notice weird things happening around the house. Like she goes to the basement and has a candle, and she walks to one certain spot in the basement, and the candle flame just ignites into this huge flame and just disappears.
Then they're scattering across the walls thinking it's rats.
She thinks it's rats, and there's nothing in there.
It's not until the point where she finds Reagan in her room, like hurting herself, and she turns her head completely around that she's like, okay, this is immediately a possession.
Yes.
Definitely possession.
And just you're just in horror because it goes from like 0 to 100 just like that.
Yeah.
And like once it starts, it does not let up until the end.
Yeah. Eventually, she calls on Father Karras to like perform an exorcism, but he explains like, there are certain things that need to be done before an exorcism can take place, which is actually, I believe, actual fact. Like you need to actually have definitive proof that this calls for an exorcism.
Yes. He explains that like he can't just walk in and just do one. He has to have like proof of it. And during this, like you can just see how the mother is so desperate to help her child, and that like she's practically going crazy.
Yeah. I kind of like that too. It shows the psychological effects of possession not only on the person who is possessed, but also the effect on the people
Around
closest to
her.
them. Which is kind of like, kind of saying for like a person with any other, like with a mental illness or a physical illness.
Yeah.
Eventually, Father Karras, like, starts meeting with Reagan and the demon inside of her. And I think immediately he takes like, a connection to her because he's seen the similar circumstances as it was with his mother.
Yeah.
Like, you go.
Yeah. Eventually, Father Karras realizes he's like, I need help with this. I can't do this. I need help. So he calls on Father Marin.
Who actually, I also met another during like one of the talks. He like notices that she starts speaking backwards, and during one of the sentences he says, "Fear the priest Marin," which kind of tells me that in this universe, like this, like this movie, like storyline universe, he's like the Van Helsing of their universe. Like demons fear him. I mean, he has been known to call on for exorcism before.
Yeah. And so the, he calls on the priest, and they start the exorcism, and just this is when the tenseness and the just the fear factor of it gets cranked up to 11. I mean, just all sorts of nasty stuff is starting to happen.
Coughing up bile, heads turning completely around.
And like these priests, all they can do is just continue the exorcism. Like they can't stop. And um, Father Marin even tells Karis, he's like, no matter what this demon says or anything, you have to keep going.
And you can't believe it. Don't try to talk to it.
Don't try to talk to it.
I also liked how this one, when you think of like demons in horror movies, you think of their like physical attacks, like how they physically overpower the victim. But in this one, it explores more from a psychological aspect, the psychological attacks of a demon.
Yes, there's a lot of psychological horror in here, but there is also some physical aspect to it, but it's mainly psychological, and I think it actually kind of makes it a little more interesting.
Yeah, I kind of noticed that. I find I like psychological horror films a lot because of that aspect.
Yeah.
You also wrote down that effects still hold up after nearly 50 years, and I have to say, I agree with you. I mean, the first time she turned her whole neck around, I'm like, that is seamless.
Yeah, definitely. This movie is almost 50 years old. It turns 50 next year, and some of the effects are still pretty impressive, especially since back then they didn't have computer generated effects, CGI. They had to use everything was practical. So it was really impressive to see some of the stuff that they were able to do.
Yeah. And like I noticed during the exorcism and some other scenes during the movie that you actually saw like a flash of the demon's actual face. Like there's like during the exorcism, and particularly there was a moment where Karras actually had a dream of his mother and he saw the face of the demon. Now I'm not sure, was that like, to me that could be one of two, like one, the demon immediately trying to mess with his mind, or two, like a message from God telling me this is your purpose, you have to help her.
It could be either or it could be both.
Yeah. Eventually, like, Karras is asked to leave the room after Mara notices the demon's effect on him,
and the demon also, like in Evil Dead, kind of manipulates the other people around the demon. So like he's talking about his mother and stuff, and just it's having an effect on him, and that's when Marin decides to dismiss Damien from the room.
but but eventually Marin is found dead, and Karras, in a fit of rage, starts attacking the demon, asking it to move from Reagan into him.
And the demon does leave and goes into Damien, but in Damien is able to gather up enough strength from himself to toss himself out the window
In order to save Reagan
and get rid of the demon.
Now, I also know two things about that scene. One, the demon doesn't move into him until his like Saint Joseph's cross is removed from him, which was also which was also similar to the Saint Joseph's medal in the beginning of the movie. And I did some research on that. Apparently, the Saint Joseph's medal is used to protect themselves from evil spirits. So probably weakened his defenses the minute it was taken off. And I also noticed, like, right before he shifted back, right before he jumped out the window, you saw, like, this seamless shift from the demon face to Damien taking back control.
Yes. And, so Damien, spoiler alert, tosses himself out the window and falls down the stairs, and immediately, just bystanders, people walking on the street, they all come out to see what has happened, and Damien has killed himself and expelling the demon by doing so.
But luckily, his friend, who was a priest, was there to help give him his last rites.
Yes.
And and the movie ends with, like, the family's like getting the heck out of town after that incident, trying to get away.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, after that incident, I'm getting out here.
Eventually, they're visited by Karras' friend, who is also a priest, and you can kind of see, like, even though Reagan doesn't remember, she does have like this subtle knowledge and gratefulness to Father Karras for saving her.
Yes. And so, the movie ends with them driving off and playing the theme to The Exorcist, and that's it.
Yeah. I have to say, I have to give this movie like a 10 out of 10. I thought, I know there's like some hype build up to it, but I feel like it kind of lives up to the hype.
Yeah, you can definitely see why this is a classic. I'll probably give it maybe a 9.5. Um, so yeah, from a movie making standpoint, this is actually a very well made movie.
Yeah.
The cinematography is great in it, and the the music throughout is really good, and it just builds this sense of dread. So that was our review of The Exorcist,
We hope you enjoy it, and if you want to watch the movie, we really recommend it.
and we'll see you next time.
Bye.